more submission. So Stacey, please. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Seed and Grain New Zealand with Dr. Sarah Clark and Cressida Patrick. I hope I said that correctly. Welcome, great to have you both here. We have you here for 10 minutes. And that time to you now.
Good morning. Kia ora koutou. I'm Sarah Clark, the Chief Executive of Seed and Grain New Zealand, and this is Cressida Patrick, our Biosecurity and Technical Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to make this oral submission, and I will assume that you've read and understood our written submission. So we're here representing our members. Firstly, I'd like to give some context about our members. In terms of grain production, our members produce and trade grains that are used for human and animal consumption. In terms of seeds, our members produce some seed for consumption and oil, but the majority are involved in domestic and international production of seeds for sowing. And I emphasise that for a reason. The seeds for sowing include grasses, clover, forage species, and vegetable seeds. A lot of the seeds are used for pastures and fodder on sheep, beef, and dairy farms here in New Zealand. And there's a significant seed export market, as you've already heard this morning, that we want to protect and grow. We support the double export agenda, and we want to protect that. New Zealand produces around 40 to 50% of the world's carrot seed and 60% of the world's radish seed and clover seed. Our members have diverse views about the Gene Technology Bill. This ranges from strong opposition to strong support and views in between. The members that support the bill welcome the opportunities to use gene technologies. They see the potential to gain access to new seed varieties and to help New Zealand primary industries tackle various challenges, including impacts of climate change or to combat pests and diseases. On the other hand, we have members against the bill because they fear the consequences of New Zealand losing its clean, green, GMO-free image. Fundamentally, these members fear losing their export trade to customers who demand GMO-free seeds for sowing. A key issue for them is that the Gene Technology Bill proposes to make some gene technologies exempt from regulation. This will mean gene-edited GMO plants can be grown without any notification, and they worry about GMOs contaminating their seed crops. Given that context, we have 3 points to make today. Our first point is about the exemptions proposed in the bill and the deep concerns our members have about seed exports and market access to GMO-sensitive markets. Our second point is a request for a framework that can track the release and growing locations of GMOs, including gene-edited GMOs. And lastly, we request that the pace of this legislation, this process is slowed down to allow for closer collaboration between regulators and stakeholders. We think this is really important to get the best outcomes for NZ Inc. We believe a more considered approach is necessary. So I'm just going to go into those 3 points in a little more detail. Our first point is about the bill's exemption of some GMOs. To explain why the exemptions are a problem for our industry, I'm going to emphasise that New Zealand produced seed is primarily for the end use of sowing. This is in comparison to seeds produced in the likes of Australia, USA, Argentina, which is seeds for oil production or consumption. So our members produce seed for sowing, and they are sold to seed companies around the world to start someone else's crops. Those overseas seed companies are highly discerning about the credentials of the seed for sowing that they buy. Many of them want GMO-free seed, and some of them are sensitive to gene-edited GMOs. Our GMO-free assurances are incredibly valuable in the international seed market, and so it's understandable that our members are deeply concerned about the exemptions under the bill. If no one has knowledge of where the gene-edited GMOs are growing, they wonder how they will give assurances that their seeds are GMO-free, and how will they know if their seed crops are contaminated from pollen from a GMO grown in the paddock across the fence without their knowledge. Which brings me to our second point. We request a framework that can enable tracking and release and locations of the release and locations of GMOs, including gene-edited GMOs. We want to collaborate and exchange information with the government to ensure the framework can coexist with existing systems. We have systems in the seed industry for tracking, but we need to ensure that they can provide reliable records of the gene-edited GMOs that are released, if they are released. We don't have the solutions to that right now, but we can articulate the outcome that our members need, which is a framework that enables them to provide assurances to their customers. And our last point is a request to slow the pace of the legislative process for the gene technology, and we'd like more engagement and collaboration with regulators. We had no contact was made with our industry during the development of the bill, and we want to have that. We want to see that in any future development of the bill and the secondary legislation. We want the process slowed to ensure that we get the settings right for NZ Inc. and the double exports agenda. New Zealand needs to be well positioned to adapt to gene technology settings in our key markets as they evolve, but we must not outpace them. We have genuine concerns that working at pace will result in mistakes on this issue that New Zealand Inc. cannot afford to make mistakes with and potentially can't be reversed. We also want to be involved to ensure our industry's concerns are addressed and that appropriate coexistence measures can be implemented. And that's the end of our oral submission. I'd just like to close by offering our time, knowledge, expertise at any stage in the development of the regulations going forward, and happy to take questions if you have them.
Excellent. We have several minutes for questions. Deborah and Steve both raise their hands.
Great to hear from some seed people because it prompted me to go and hunt through some heirloom seeds that I want for my own garden. Things trigger all the time. Hey, you want to sort of track the use of GM organisms or indoor plants or whatever. So in the legislation, it says that some would be exempt or just entirely outside. Now, would you be more comfortable with legislation if there was at least a register of uses of even those exempt type?
As I said, what we're focusing on is what our industry needs, which is they need to be able to give the assurances to their customers. So whatever that solution is, we would like to work with officials to make that happen. There is a lot of uncertainty about how realistic it is that we can have coexistence. A lot of these plants, the pollen flows. We've heard about seeds on sheep's back, bird dispersal. It's a challenging space to get coexistence, and you just need to understand that what has been proposed is going to be incredibly difficult for the seed industry to maintain the exports that they have, let alone double or grow what they have.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear on that point, the ag research confirmed to us that we would not be able to stop the spread of ryegrass over the course of years and decades. It's just not realistic to consider that. So what are the risks to your industry of the cost of compliance for trying to achieve this coexistence, aside from the fact it's completely unclear how it will be achieved? Currently, you have a situation where with no effort, you are absolutely confident that you don't have any GM components or gene edited components in New Zealand produced product because we don't have any GMO production here. So the costs that you are facing could be, extensive if there's release of risk.
That's a good point. Thank you for raising that. Yeah, we and we've explained and we've made comments in our written submission that the costs of providing those assurances going forward if GMOs are released are really uncertain. I expect they would be high, and I don't know who can cover those, whether it would be something that would be put back onto the industry. And if that's the case, again, that's just another cost input for our farmers and producers who already have internationally pretty high cost inputs.
The bill currently proposes that those wanting to market as a non-GMO product will wear the cost of proving that. Do you think that's reasonable?
It's a tough one.
I'm quite happy to talk. Yes. So no, we didn't think that was a reasonable. That's the sort of issue that was raised earlier by one of the other submitters, that you're putting that cost on the people potentially showing that they're non-GMO, as well as those needing to provide evidence that they are GMO. So we didn't think that was realistic. I think as well, currently in New Zealand, we don't have the technologies to do the testing. So everything we do has to be sent offshore, which compounds the fact that we need to meet growing seasons. We miss shipments, we miss consignments, by waiting for those lab results. So it's quite an expensive endeavour to prove, and we were quite disappointed that it wasn't really considered in greater detail in the RIS. And I think that point has been made in our written submission and has been raised by several other submitters.
Yeah, that has been something that we've heard on several occasions.
Yes.
We're at time. Thank you very much for your submission. It was very helpful for us. Thank you.
Okay, so we're running a little tad over time, so we'll start with some basic thoughts about what we thought about that submission, and then we'll go to closing statements.
I would just say that there's one thing about their submission that I would highlight, and that is that they're a $281 million a year export industry. And I'm not aware of anything in the pipeline from gene editing that would rival that value. Why put $281 million at risk for a few boutique or token kinds of genome edited organisms without the kind of consultation that industry is asking for?
Soraya.
No, I totally agree. I don't understand why this bill wasn't ring-fenced. So a part dealing with the medical and a part dealing with the environmental, because the environmental and the farming has to have a much larger component. This here is a plant called pennyroyal, and about 30 years ago, a farmer just up the road planted some oats that was contaminated with it. And now it grows all around the district. You can't stop it. And fortunately, the cattle doesn't eat it because it's actually an abortive agent. So in traditional Roman times and medieval times, it was used by women to induce abortions. So you can imagine if you had cows eating it, that it would be really bad if you had a paddock full of pregnant cattle. So you cannot stop the spread of anything in New Zealand. In Australia, it's not quite as vulnerable, I would say, because they're using annuals, not perennials. And what New Zealand's looking at doing is perennials. And what beef and lamb and ag research is doing as perennials, and I don't really understand why taxpayers have been funding it, really.
And with that said, thank you so much, Professor Jack. Thank you so much, Soraya, for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you. And I hope you guys have enjoyed yourselves.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very
Sam.
much. All right, and we'll be back with Sam.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the order, paper.